everybody, and welcome to this episode of the CCC Digital Brief with Mark O'Loughlin and the Cloud Credential Council. Now, in this series of the CCC Digital Brief, I'm asking global digital experts to comment on the impact COVID-19 is having on organizations and how digital technologies and services can help. Now, on today's CCC Digital Brief, we're joined by Gary Duffield. Gary is the Alliances Director for training firm DDLS and is based in Australia. Gary, thank you so much for joining us today.
My absolute pleasure. It's a shame that this is a subject we have to talk about, but always happy to share. You know that.
It is, but it's topical. It's for some reason trending at the moment. So, and I think it's important as well. Now, Gary, to start with, can you tell us what industry do you work in?
So DDLS is Australia's largest provider of technical training. So that's your typical Microsoft, Google, AWS training. We're also particularly strong in process, ITIL, agile. So we are, I would probably describe us as a traditional, 90% traditional bricks and mortar training business.
Traditional bricks and mortar training business. So that leads me on to the first question we're going to check. How has your industry, the traditional bricks and mortar training industry, been impacted by COVID-19?
Clearly I overemphasize that because we are a business that, in theory could have been hugely negatively impacted by the COVID situation. There was a brilliant quote from Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. He says something along the lines of, in the last 2 months, we've seen 2 years worth of digital disruption. And
Yes.
I reposted that on LinkedIn, and I said, we've seen 2 years worth of digital disruption last Thursday. As a training business, literally, the word pivot appears to become the de facto way to describe this. We pivoted our business from a 90% IoT business into a 100% virtual business. And you know what? Under normal circumstances, we would have planned a year for that, and maybe taken a year to execute. We literally Thursday next week, centres are closed. People can't get into the city centres. We have to reinvent this business.
Yeah. So in reinventing the business, in pivoting the business, how has that affected the delivery of your services, your traditional training services to meet the needs of your customers? Because it slightly changes now, where you had a lot of face-to-face, and now, as you said, it's a 100% virtual, because that's all we can do at the moment.
I think culturally what we've found in Australia over the years is there's a preference for IoT. So even though we had IoT capabilities, it was only a small part of our business. The biggest chunk of virtual delivery was actually connecting location to location. So somebody could attend a course in Brisbane that was being delivered from Sydney because we got very expensive telepresence kit in 2 different training centres. So you're still inside that training bubble, that training environment. When suddenly that dynamic changes and you can't get students into those training centres, actually you can't do things the same. You can't think the same way. You have to work out what business is going to look like going forward. And that's from a delivery perspective and from a customer experience perspective. Fundamentally, if the customer isn't getting what they need, if they're not getting the skills that they need, not leaving the training with what they need to equip them for their journey, then we're kind of doing it wrong. So it really was put the brakes on and shift. And just to give you a tip, the way we chose to do that, we were still allowed to have trainers inside the centres. So we were still leveraging the significant investment we'd made in Cisco telepresence equipment, but people were joining those events remotely from their own home location or work location, if they were lucky enough to still be in an office, rather than being in another DDLS location.
That's interesting. So rather than do, let's say, 100% lockdown into, social distancing, you still could deploy a trainer into an office, seeing as they're not going to be interacting with anybody else, but they could leverage the technology that you had to deliver the training.
Correct.
Which I guess is, you're pivoting your business, but you're still trying to figure out, can I use some of the office assets that I have while still making sure that the trainer safety is paramount, as well as
it does come down to those assets that we've got, the investment that we've made from an experience point of view. Some trainers were delivering from home, and it's kind of a surreal experience. I popped into an office because we're in WA particularly, we're allowed to do that. And there are trainers each sat at a separate table on their own having lunch. There are no students anywhere near the business, but they are getting to use that very expensive equipment to deliver the best possible experience, given what we know. And I'm very conscious of training companies in Australia who basically stopped It's like, hang on, we don't have any infrastructure for this. We've got to work out how to
Yeah.
do this. There's one springs to mind, stopped business for about 6 weeks. Literally, well, they basically got trainers up to speed and got the equipment, and our local providers of webcams suddenly sold out. So if you haven't got that investment, hey, are we really going to deliver a high quality, expensive training intervention with a webcam on a laptop? He says, pointing at his laptop.
Yes.
Or are we going to use the reasonably expensive stuff? So nobody
Yes.
was expecting this. Nobody had a drawer full of webcams.
Yeah, and we saw that ourselves. We're across webcams, microphones, sold out, that kind of thing. So it is important, I guess, to have the equipment. Can I ask as well? Do you think that there was a lot of people that I guess online learning doesn't suit everybody, and a lot of people would still like the classroom-based experience, the face-to-face. But do you think their opinions have changed because of necessity, because they're not going to see that for a period of time, that they're more receptive to giving the online version a go? And then secondly, to make that work, it then is incumbent on training organizations to provide a good digital remote experience. So do you think
we
the
lost we
perception
lost
will
some
change?
customers along the way. I don't. These things happen. We're not allowed in the office. But when you explained what the
Yeah.
virtual experience was like, we actually maintained a lot of our business. But I think, Mark, you kind of nailed it. We're much more accepting. I was on a call
Yeah.
recently. It was brilliant. I actually watched a very senior lady was in the meeting, and her child got on its hands and knees, probably about 15 or 16-year-old, and crawled behind her. Got some lollies or some sweets, and then crawled back again. That we
Yeah.
almost sort of looked down on that and frowned. It's like when a dog barks on a meeting. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
whose dog's
Yeah.
that? Whereas now it's like, well, hey, look at that. There's somebody wandering around the back of that individual.
Yeah.
We're all more accepting. We're all more used to using the technology. This conversation we're having now, I didn't need to fly to London or the US. You didn't need to come to
Yeah.
Perth because we can't do that. Yet we're having,
Yes.
a perfectly acceptable, conversation.
Yeah, and I think, as I said, the background stuff is very interesting where it happens. I think a lot of people are forgiving and to not feel pressurized that your environment where you're working from home or wherever that remoteness is can mirror an office environment, because there's lots of people sharing the environment. So I think that's interesting. Now, I guess, has all this current situation that we're seeing, has that impacted your view on the importance of digital transformation?
Well, we've all been on a digital transformation journey, even though we might not have wanted to admit it, or could even define what it was. But
Yeah.
fundamentally, just a shift to digital manuals was part of the digital transformation of training businesses, and that was what 10 years ago when that started to happen. Not to minimize your question, but to grow it slightly. I think the bigger question is, what does this look like? What does this journey look like? What is the destination going to look like? And I've, over recent times, as you've been doing, I've been talking to different learning businesses around the world, and some huge multinational businesses, and we're all of the same view and we don't know. We think there'll be a much more blended view of the world, but
Yes.
will it suddenly be a case of, hey, this whole thing's lifted? Right, let me back in your classroom. I was over all of that. I didn't enjoy any of that. We're getting outstanding feedback. We use metrics that matter. You may
Right.
be familiar with that tool. The feedback we're getting is outstanding. People are learning. They're going on that journey. It's not been plain sailing. We had a trainer delivering who'd never delivered virtually before, and he got people to do the introduction when you go around class. Hi, my name's Gary. I'm here because he realized after about
Yes.
an hour and a half that was probably a mistake. You
Yes.
have to adapt the way you learn, you have to adapt the way you deliver, and fundamentally, and here's the biggie, the people who create the content will have to adapt the way that content is written and architected. Now, maybe you're not going to do 5-day courses. Maybe it'll be one day, then some e-learning, then something virtual. The flipped
Yes.
classroom, the blended training that you and I have talked about for 20 years, but probably never really happened en masse.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. We could spend maybe an hour on that. We'll probably come back to it. As you said, I think we have to relook at the training curriculum or the formats that we break that down into now and how we phase that for this remote education.
Mm.
And not assume that what works in the classroom, some of it will work, some of it you need to change and redevelop, some of it you need to take a completely different view. So pivot all of that. That's interesting. Um, what I've seen at the moment, I use this phrase, digital acquisition. So a lot of organizations they're now using Zoom or Teams or Skype and all these types of technologies to communicate, and they're labeling that as digital transformation. Now, I take a particular view. I'd be interested in how you see this as well. That to me, I would refer to that as digital acquisition. We're acquiring digital skills, sorry, digital technologies to do things, But digital transformation is more about what you were saying, pivoting the business and changing the business using digital technologies to redo how you did business in the past. There can be a difference. So not one is we can acquire digital
Mm.
tools, or one we can use these tools to do something different. What's your take on that? Do you see that as well? That, or no? So the challenge that I see organizations face is they're confusing the two. They think that adopting a tool like Zoom or Skype or Teams is part of their digital transformation strategy, where it's really they've got a tool, but they need to look at their business and reinvent or re-see how they
No,
do business
I'm
digitally.
100% with you. That's not digital transformation. That's digital Swiss Army knife. You're making use of the capabilities and the facilities that you have to hand.
Yes,
We're using a platform now. We use Zoom. We use Teams. We're using Teams quite a lot these days. We used to use
yes,
WebEx and all of those tools. I've got new capabilities. You can now raise a hand in Teams. We've been able to do that in
mhm,
WebEx for a little while. Um,
yes,
I think it's about how you actually then start to use those tools. I've got a hammer, but until somebody gives me a nail and helps me knock it into a wall, that's not nail transformation. That's just me having a hammer. It is it
true,
is lev-
true.
it is leveraging these tools to create something that's new that has a positive impact on your
Mhm.
business or a positive impact on the learners. So I'm 100% with you. I would not be impressed if a CIO said, "Yeah, we've got digital transformation. We've rolled out Teams. Great that you've done that. But are you using that tool? Are you using the collaboration capabilities? Are you using all
Yes,
of the capabilities? And what does that look like? What's the strategy behind that? Rather than, hey, I've got a
yes.
hammer."
And it looks like your business has done that. They've acquired additional digital technologies and tools, but you've then looked at how you're doing business and how you're trained, translating face to face into remote learning, changing the models behind that. And I think that that's a good success. I love your phrase. We're going to steal it. We're going to write about it. Digital Swiss Army knife. Love that. So,
Copyright Gary Duffield 2020. But absolutely, with great integrity, I can tell you that we have not cancelled a single course. So
fantastic. I think that
so
that's,
so had
yeah,
we done digital transformation before? No, we hadn't. Did we have the Swiss Army knife, the digital Swiss Army knife? Yeah, absolutely, we did. We just leveraged, ramped up, scaled is probably the right word. We just scaled
scaled
some of
it.
the
Yeah.
stuff we were already doing, and basically brought it to the customers because the customers or the learners had no choice.
Good. And it sounds to me you didn't stop at a tool. You got the tool, but that wasn't the focus of the tool. Was, as you said, I need a hammer to drive a nail into the wall to hang a picture. So I needed tools to then help us, and then we reformatted how we're delivering these courses. And I
The
would suggest
platform's
you're probably
irrelevant.
still,
We don't
yeah,
mind whether
yeah,
it's Zoom or Teams. It's what we're
yeah,
doing with that Swiss Army knife. It's it's
absolutely,
the blade to get the thing out the horse's hoof that nobody ever uses. It's
yeah.
using those blades
And
appropriately.
yes, yes. And I guess a big part of the learning there and what you're doing with these tools is how do you keep the learner engaged? Because we're getting Zoom fatigue and Teams fatigue, and everybody's in all these meetings. Um, that to step out of that and go on to do a training course can cause more fatigue. So I think from what I'm hearing is you're learning again. The tool is just a tool, but you're learning ways to actually maintain the relationships and maintain the training in a way that excites the learner rather than
But you need the
offers them.
subject matter expert to do that. I've attended a couple of training courses recently, not with DDLS, I hasten to add, and they've overused tools like Kahoot. If you're familiar with Kahoot,
Yeah,
where you get the little word clouds and you're typing things on your phone. It's almost like they've read the Big Dummies book to doing virtual training, and it
yeah,
says to do something interactive. So every 5 minutes, we're going to stop and make you do something. If the content's interesting, if there are lab space throughout whatever it is you're doing,
yeah.
if there are little tasks you can get people to do, you can maintain the same momentum as you do in the
They'll
classroom.
they'll stay engaged. They will. Gary, can I ask? Looking forward, crystal ball, 6, 12 months. What are I know? What are some of the
I
biggest?
predicted this. I knew this was coming.
What are some of the? I know there's a significant change at the moment, but over the next 6 to 12 months, do you see any additional changes happening in your industry, in the training, the learning development industry?
Yeah, unbelievably. But let me put that in the context of 5 years ago when maybe you were having an interview and somebody said, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" No, nobody predicted this. Oh, sat at home and able to go out of the house and
Yeah,
eating
yeah,
takeaways
yeah.
every night. This has to have a huge and fundamental impact on learning.
Mm,
But I think for me, where that change will come, it'll actually come from the market, particularly in Australia, where we're
Right.
only now getting, internet speeds where we can have this kind of conversation.
Yes. Yes.
I think there'll be a marked acceptance now. And speaking frankly, there is a worry that we end up with one market split in two directions. Hey, we want to do this training course. We want it in the classroom. We want it virtual. We have the same number of potential students, but we're splitting that in two. So arguably, the skill will be building that blended solution, which appeases and pleases everybody, and everybody gets the best way to learn for their particular learning style. I'm afraid my crystal ball is completely broken. I'm spending hours just thinking what virtual looks like.
Yeah.
From a real estate point of view, as you and I have chatted, if you've got hundreds and hundreds of classroom, that costs a lot of money. Maybe in 5 years, we'll find we've got smaller training centres. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe those big places get turned into apartments. Who knows? I think one of the key things at the moment is search for answers, but knowing that there's no right answer at the moment. We've got to keep doing the pivoting, doing the searching, doing the relearning, reevaluation, I think quicker than we've ever done before and faster because for everything we get right, there might be something that we try that doesn't work. So we have to go back and keep doing it. Because I think we're in this for a period of time. I think there's great opportunity in this space. I think the willingness from what you're saying as well for learners to use more of the online because that's just what we have at the moment. Is there provided that, but the secret sauce I guess is getting it right, making it engaging. Don't just cut and paste from the classroom in. Trying to keep people engaged. The content is generally good, but trying to make it relevant, to make it excitable again, to cut through all this Zoom fatigue that people have. Gary, I've one final question. I'm going to end on this. What do you look forward to most of all when all of this craziness is over?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. You know that I relocated from the UK to Australia about 9 years ago. I have a microbrewery at the end of the road. I'm just looking forward to sitting in there and just watching the world go by for a little while and thinking to myself, what was that? What did I just miss? What did I just witness? Um, but yeah, we're all going to be, I'll say, better people at the end of this. But we are all going to be kind of richer in terms of our experience. 30 years doing this job. I've got nothing to prepare me for this pandemic. I've lived through global financial crises in the training and
Yeah,
learning world. At the end of this, I'll be able to say, you know what, next pandemic, I've got it covered.
fantastic. I'll join you for a beer when it's all over. Hopefully, I can fly at that stage, but if not, we'll do virtual beers. Gary Duffield, thank you so much for joining us today on the CCC Digital Brief.
Thank you, my friend. Have a great day.
Thanks, Gary. We'll talk soon.